Hey guys, I know usually you guys hear the intro music, then I start talking, and then you guys sit back and enjoy. But I wanted to kind of flip the script on this podcast because I wanted to start off by saying a couple things. The first one is I'm sorry that I missed the podcast yesterday. I had some family stuff to attend to. I had a really good show written. But I didn't have enough time in the day, and I don't like pre-recording stuff because I like talking about things as they happen, so you guys can see my natural emotion and my natural opinions to these things. And so that's why I missed the podcast yesterday. Family is always going to come first. As much as I enjoy creating content and as much as I love making these podcasts, I just had to attend to some family matters. The second thing I wanted to talk about is if my sound is a little bit better. I got some new equipment and we're still working that out. And, each podcast, the goal is to make it better than the podcast before. And so hopefully, each episode is sounding better, feeling better, flowing better. And this new equipment definitely should help that. The third thing I wanted to say before we start this show is I'm working on a better schedule. The Wednesday, Saturday one is working great for now, but I also might want to switch things up, maybe go Monday, Friday, or even down to 1 day a week, just seeing how things work. Maybe going 1 day a week and just a longer show. I'm still trying to work out the kinks, but I'll be back touching base with you guys on that stuff a little bit later when I have it figured out. With that all being said, cue the music. What is going on, everybody on the sound waves listening to the Vert podcast here on theverticaljump.org? You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. Heck, we're even on YouTube now, so you guys can all check that out. Whichever way you want to listen to more episodes of the Vert, we got that for you. It's been a crazy couple days in sports, as it always is when I get to you guys about it. But NBA free agency, not officially starts at 6 p.m., but, deals are getting done beforehand because the NBA allows tampering now, and I don't mind either. So let's just dive right into that. The biggest one of the day is Kevin Durant deciding to go to the Brooklyn Nets on a 4-year, $142 million deal, I believe. For the Brooklyn Nets, this is quite the turnaround. All year, it's been, wow, this Brooklyn Nets team is overachieving with D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, and all those guys. They were overachieving. Everybody projected the Brooklyn Nets not to be very good this year due to the fact that, for one, it's the first year they've owned their draft picks since the Celtics supposedly fleeced them a while back in that Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade. And instead, this Brooklyn Nets team made the playoffs. They were a 6th seed. And then not only that, they won a game in the playoffs, and that series was a lot more competitive than people suggest now looking back on it. Nonetheless, the Brooklyn Nets signed Kevin Durant, and they're expected to sign Kyrie Irving as soon as the free agency window opens up later on this evening. So for the Brooklyn Nets, again, what a turnaround. What an organizational turnaround. Going from the top down, from a bad owner that eventually was flipped and changed, and eventually, things, it took time, it took growth, it took effort, but they're finally starting to turn their franchise around. And a team of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant with a good young core that the Brooklyn Nets have, and Joe Harris and Karis LeVert and guys like that, Jared Allen, that team can compete, especially in the East. And you got to think for the Milwaukee Bucks, it now puts the pressure on them because a lot of people thought that Kawhi might go west, and that is now opening the door for the MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo, to put a stranglehold on the East, and then this happens. So I'm excited for the Nets. I'm excited for what that team can do and what that team's capable of doing. But we also have to remember that Kevin Durant's not going to play this upcoming season. So it will just be Kyrie for a little bit. It'll be that for a year. And we saw what that can do to a team in the Boston Celtics. And that's what I kind of want to transition to, is just that we often single-handedly blame Kyrie Irving for what happened in Boston. and how that team underperformed. And obviously the media has reported on that extensively. But Jackie McMullen of ESPN had a great piece talking about it wasn't just Kyrie Irving that was the problem in Boston. It was the entire system. Kyrie Irving was just kind of the center figure in that system. See, Brad Stevenson had this relationship with Gordon Hayward where when Gordon Hayward was struggling, he wasn't going to not play him or limit Gordon Hayward's shots because they have that past relationship. Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, those guys like that, guards like that, just got off a deep postseason run. And, Kyrie came back and started taking their minutes. You had young guys like Jason Tatum, who was coming into his own in the playoff run previous to this one, but Kyrie came back, started taking some of his shots, kind of taking some of his possessions, and it created this perfect storm of mixing identities to create the conflict that we had there. So maybe this narrative on Kyrie Irving is a bit unfair, that he's a team killer, because I think maybe a fresh start is all Kyrie Irving needs. He may be emotionally aloof, as I spoke to on the last podcast, but he could have just needed a fresh start. And Jackie McMullen also said that he just didn't like living in Boston either. And that can really affect your working situation. Think about a job that you have. If it's in the wrong city, if you don't feel at home where you're at, you're going to hate going to that job every day, especially if that job is having organizational turmoil. And so the Celtics, though they have a great general manager and though they had all these assets and young pieces, and though from the outside looking in, they looked wonderful on paper, that you wouldn't want to be in any situation other than the Boston Celtics. Again, from the inside out, it was bad management of player attitudes. It was Brad Stevens being afraid to kind of step up and manage the players in terms of their relationships. And it just created, again, that perfect storm. So with Kyrie Irving going to Brooklyn, teaming up with Kevin Durant, it's exciting. It's a fresh start for both of these guys. And Kyrie Irving is going to get to show the world who he is when it's just him for 1 year and reaffirm that he's still the point guard we thought he is. And he's still kind of that leader we thought he is. Kyrie Irving and KD, I'm happy for them in their new situation, and it should be an exciting and fun to watch basketball fit, especially if Kevin Durant can return to who he was before the Achilles injury, and that's a big caveat. You just don't know what player you're going to get back when you have an Achilles injury like this. I mean, you see Boogie Cousins, who seemingly can't jump over a piece of paper anymore. So what KD are we going to get back? Are we going to get back 100% KD, 88% KD, 95% KD? You just don't know. But let me just reaffirm this, that 88% KD is still better than over 3/4 of the NBA. So that's why the Brooklyn Nets saw that it was worth paying Kevin Durant near that max deal in 4 years, 142. That's kind of the next thing I want to touch on, though, is player contracts dealing with player movement. Now, the Supermax was instilled to help the superstars' home team retain their superstar, saying, we're the only team that can offer you that fifth year, that upwards of $200 million. We're the only team that can do that. But we've seen routinely, especially at the start of this free agency, that players are kind of turning down the Supermax money in order to live a different lifestyle or live in a different area or be on a different team. And I just want to go out and say that I think we overrate the money factor in free agency. Players are going to go where they want to go. Players are going to play with who they want to play with. So we're always like, oh, but this team, the Warriors, could offer Kevin Durant the Supermax, and they did. And Kevin Durant turned it down. Kevin Durant wanted a change of lifestyle. He wanted a change of pace. And teams that can offer the Supermax often end up regretting it later on. That's just the fact of these contracts. That fifth year when that star is in their mid to late 30s and they're owed $50 million is a heavy cost to eat up for a team. And so that Supermax deal, I think we overrate it. We overrate the money factor in free agency. Players are going to go where they want to go. They're going to go where they feel that they can win or achieve personal success or brand success more. And we're really seeing that now with players like Kawhi Leonard, who the Toronto Raptors are still unsure of what he plans to do. And so I just wanted to get out there and speak on the fact that this money that we overvalue is indeed overvalued. Players are going to turn down the Supermax because they make so much money elsewhere, whether it's business ventures, endorsements, companies. Players have other streams of income. Basketball isn't their only stream of income. And so we should really take that into account when we're kind of talking about free agency and trying to figure out where players are going and what players are going to do what and what players are going to team up. A lot of it is never about the money at the end of the day. We saw Anthony Davis waive his $4 million trade kicker because he's working on Space Jam and is most likely going to make that back. The Supermax is just a function of NBA contracts. We don't know how helpful it is at the end of the day because guys that have been given the Supermax, it hasn't really worked out that well in terms of John Wall and now Russell Westbrook, who in his last year is going to be eating up around $54 million from the Oklahoma City Thunder. So we'll see how the Supermax continues to evolve in the NBA. And a guy that was offered his version of the Supermax was Damian Lillard with the Portland Trailblazers. He's going to stay there. He's going to continue building what he already has built there, which is exciting for the Portland Trailblazers. I think Damian Lillard is very much worth the 4 for $196 that they got him at. I think what he does for the Portland Trailblazers can't be replicated, and so you have to make sure you bring that guy back, especially after a postseason that they just had. And so that's a good signing for Portland. And then I wanted to touch on briefly is Kemba Walker going to the Boston Celtics. And I want to say briefly because a lot of people have been talking about it lately, and I feel that there's not much more that needs to be said other than this one clarification. Celtics fans are operating under this assumption that Kemba Walker is the poor man's Kyrie Irving, and that's not the case. I feel that Kemba Walker's different in his leadership style. He's different in his approach to the game. He's different in his ability to relate to his teammates. Kyrie Irving's kind of aloof. I spoke on that again last podcast and earlier on this podcast. But Kemba Walker's all for his guys. Look at what he did in Charlotte. Look at that culture that he built in Charlotte. That if Michael Jordan wasn't such an inept owner at times, could have capitalized on a great year from Kemba Walker this past season. I think he's a perfect leader for this bunch of guys that they have in Boston. A whole bunch of young guys that want to play hard, and Kemba Walker will play the hardest out of all of them. He's one of the few superstars that you see give 110% every single night, and him going to Boston with Brad Stevenson is a perfect fit. Because Brad Stevenson, we saw what he can do with an undersized guard that's really shifty in Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas almost had an MVP year. And then put Kemba Walker in that scenario, a couple inches taller. Kemba's around 6 foot, 6'1", kind of can do what Isaiah Thomas did. I feel that he's the type of leader that this Boston team needs. He's the type of guy, he doesn't have much playoff experience, but those are the type of guys that will just play hard at a random game in the middle of March because they care about winning that much, and they just, at the end of the day, point blank care. So Kemba Walker to Boston is a great fit, and I'm happy to see Kemba in a different uniform other than Charlotte, with a GM and an owner that's going to be willing to go out there and spend to put the team around him that can compete, unlike Michael Jordan was able to do, which kind of confuses me because Michael Jordan dished out a whole bunch of bad contracts to guys like Cody Zeller, Bismack Biyombo, Nicholas Batum, all these guys that are average basketball players, but when it was Kemba Walker's turn to re-sign with the Charlotte Hornets, he said, we're not going to be willing to pay you what you deserve. We want to lowball you. That's why Kemba Walker left, and you can blame Michael Jordan, but that just set the Charlotte Hornets back. So with that being said, that's all I really wanted to say about Kemba. I now kind of want to talk about Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler is the most confusing man in the NBA right now. And let me tell you why. Let me break it down for you. Earlier in the season, when Jimmy Butler forced his way out of Minnesota, he said he wanted to play for a winner, and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins don't care about winning. You know, they're young players. They're trying to figure out their way in the league, and he didn't want to be a part of that. So what did Jimmy Butler do? He got himself onto the Philadelphia 76ers. Sixers traded Robert Covington, Dario Saric, and a couple other pieces for Jimmy Butler, and the fit worked. Playing alongside Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler could coast for a lot of the game, but then Philadelphia would say, hey, Jimmy, you're our closer. It was a good move for the Philadelphia 76ers. They were needing that extra punch on the perimeter, a scoring guard that could also defend, and Jimmy was that perfect marriage for them. The move at the time made perfect sense. And then as the season wore on, Philadelphia felt that their window is now within the next couple of years, so they made a move for Tobias Harris, which to me didn't make much sense, but they also had one of the best starting fives in the league. Fast forward to free agency, Jimmy Butler's contract is up. Again, going off of what Jimmy Butler said at the start of the year, he wants to play for a winner. So where should Jimmy Butler go? Should he go to Houston? He's entertaining a meeting from them. The next team that came up was the Miami Heat, which, if you think about his premise for wanting out of Minnesota, makes no sense. The Miami Heat are a team that's kind of stuck in no man's land. They were the 9th seed this past season, got beat out in the playoffs by the Detroit Pistons and the Orlando Magic. Those two teams really near the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And Jimmy Butler is now reportedly leaning strongly towards the Miami Heat, which at the end of the day doesn't go well with the principle that he set for himself in leaving Minnesota. Why would he want to go to a middle-of-the-road team that has no chance at winning the title, that's going to pay him less than Philadelphia? And it's a worse basketball situation. Yes, he can go to Miami and put up all the numbers he wants. He has a great head coach there. But a team of just Jimmy Butler and role players isn't winning you a title. I can't stress that enough. As good as Jimmy Butler is as a player, if he's your number one option, you're not going to get out of the second round. And so the best situation for Jimmy Butler would be to stay put in Philadelphia. I don't know why you'd want to leave. Philadelphia can offer you the most money. It's a better basketball fit. It goes with your premise that you set when you left Minnesota of, I want to play for a team that can compete for a championship. Where else can you go? The Houston Rockets don't really have the cap space to pay you a max slot unless they move some pieces around, find a trade partner for Clint Capella. So, at the end of the day, Philadelphia provides Jimmy Butler the needed ability to fulfill what he set out to do when leaving Minnesota. He's a primary option in the fourth quarter for the Sixers. He can command the offense when Ben Simmons doesn't want to in the playoffs, while also playing with a top 5 talent in Joel Embiid. I couldn't ask for a better team if it were me, but then again, I'm not Jimmy Butler, and I can't be in his head or understand what these players are thinking because it's a lot of speculation until the deal is actually done. We saw what happened. DeAndre Jordan agreed to sign with the Mavs, and then the Clippers raided his house and said, you're staying with us, only for Chris Paul to get traded and Blake Griffin to get traded, and then DeAndre Jordan was the last one left. So at the end of the day, in terms of basketball fit, Jimmy Butler should stay in Philadelphia because it's the best basketball fit. And if money matters to him, Philadelphia can offer him the most money. And if they let Tobias Harris go, they have another max slot, and either they can fill it with signing a whole bunch of one-year pieces that will come off the books next season, or they'll be able to go out and find somebody else. It's a real interesting time in Philadelphia. It's a real good time in Philadelphia because I know their playoff exit was disappointing, but their future is looking even brighter as long as Embiid can stay healthy and they can bring back Jimmy Butler. We'll see what they do with Tobias Harris. I feel more that he would be gone because I don't understand where he fits in with this team. And I think that Philadelphia, using the remaining money that would be Tobias Harris to go into depth, would be much better than to spend it on Tobias Harris. The playoffs for him were a bit disappointing. He kind of looked too small in big moments and didn't show up when the team needed him most. And so I say Philadelphia should move on from Tobias Harris if he's already leaning that way and spend the money on needed depth. So for NBA free agency, that's really the main headlines I wanted to talk about going into this evening and the next couple weeks of NBA free agency. We had a couple players stay on the teams that they were respectively on. Harrison Barnes, an honorable man, re-signed with the Kings. You couldn't pay me $200 million to play for the Kings at times. But, I mean, can I really crack that joke? Because they have De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, a great young backcourt. The Kings are looking up. The Kings are also saying that they are looking to replace Willie Cauley-Stein because Cauley-Stein wants out. Maybe Clint Capella can go there if the Rockets can find a decent trade offer. Maybe my Thunder will, talk them into taking Steven Adams. As much as I love Steven Adams, his contract is pretty tough to swallow. He's owed $27 million. The next topic I wanted to talk about was the USA men's team in the Gold Cup and just in general national team sports. If you're a fan of Team USA, I'm going to ask you to calm down. This was a conversation that me and my friend were having when watching Team USA play Panama. Fans expect too much out of the Team USA national team too soon. Yes, they have talented players like Tyler Boyd and Christian Pulisic. They have some veterans in Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley. But relatively, this is a young team. It's an unproven team. It's a lot of guys that are kind of trying to find their footing with the national team and prove that they belong. Fans go into these games expecting the USA to play as if they're France or Belgium, heck, even Brazil sometimes. But that's not the case for Team USA. It took not qualifying for the World Cup for them to finally see that a rebuild and a reboot was needed, that they couldn't keep putting out that same 11 of veterans every single time there was a big national game and expect to see a result. And for fans, you have to honor the process. So I'm going to speak about the process in different countries real quick, just to put it into perspective. Now, USA fans say, well, we have Pulisic. He's a great young player. He can be our version of, what Messi is for Argentina and what Ronaldo is for Portugal. And think, is that what you really want? A system predicated on one player playing their absolute best at all times? Is that proven to work in team sports, especially such a team sport like soccer? How many times has Argentina fallen short in the World Cup or other international trophies? Think about the Copa America, where they lost on penalties in the finals 2 years in a row. That's painful. Messi has quit the national team multiple times because of the amount he has to carry for Argentina. At times, if it's not Messi, it doesn't happen. And I get that a lot of teams go as their best player goes, and that's a reality in sports. But to build a dominant team like France, like Belgium, like Germany before their fall off, you have to have a lot of talent at different positions, outside back, center back, midfield. You have to have talent all across the field at all levels of the field in order to compete at a consistent level on the national stage. USA should win a World Cup. They should. They have the resources to. But you have to honor the process. Fans need to start honoring the process. They can't go out and boo a young team and expect the best result. Young players are very impressionable. They're not like these veterans who are able to block out a lot of the fans' hate. Young players see what fans are saying about them. And so for the fans to want to accelerate this rebuild, say, whoa, we should be competing now. Pulisic is a great player. He should be able to do what Messi does for Argentina now. It's too soon. And take a deep breath, calm down, and say, we don't want this to be a Band-Aid fix. We want this to be a stitches fix. Think about it. You cut yourself deeply with a knife. If you put a Band-Aid on that cut, is that going to heal well? No. It'll be okay for a little bit. It'll stop the bleeding for a little bit. It'll keep it closed for a little bit. But at the end of the day, that cut's not going to heal well. If you cut yourself deeply with a knife and you go to the ER and you get stitches and they stitch you up, they close the wound, and then they cover it with a bandage. When they take that bandage off, the skin's going to be pulled together. It's going to be healed perfectly fine, almost good as new. And the cut was Team USA not making the World Cup. And saying that we should go out there and be the best team now, and no matter what, always put out our best 11, no matter who we're playing. Let's not give other players a chance to develop. It's just slapping a Band-Aid on the problem and saying, I think that'll do. And slapping a Band-Aid on the problem leads to situations like Argentina, leads to situations like Portugal, where they have a generational talent and they've never been able to win a World Cup with them. If we want that situation to be the U.S., then go ahead and support just playing our best 11, only funneling the ball to Pulisic, never developing anybody else. Go ahead and support that. But if you want the U.S. to compete for decades and decades with a great infrastructure and routinely great teams and managers that cycle through here, then it starts with rebuilding the culture from the ground up. And the U.S. is finally starting to do that. So take a deep breath, relax. It's going to be okay. And by the time this podcast is out, the USA will have probably played their quarterfinal game already. So we'll see the result of that. But it's okay. Take a deep breath, relax. The USA is building something special here. They have a lot of young talent. And I look forward to seeing how this team progresses in the future. It's funny because my home country, Uganda, is kind of going through that whole same thing. Now, the Uganda's never been as good as the USA because we're a smaller country and, we're an African nation and there's a whole bunch of us. But Uganda has always had an older team. They've always just, they haven't had the development camps for their young players. And a lot of their young guys would go to other countries when they were younger to play soccer at a better level there and have a better opportunity to play professionally. But now Uganda's starting to build a better national team because they're putting money into it. They're putting money into developing camps. And we're seeing decent results now, especially in the Africa Cup of Nations, where we're going to most likely finish second in our group and go through to the knockout stages, although we lost to Egypt today. But we're starting to see younger teams being put out there, them willing to develop talent. And I'm telling you guys, with soccer, it's especially difficult because it just takes time on the national level. Give these guys time to develop and they will produce for you. Give them the reps they need. That goes for Uganda and the USA. Give the young guys the reps they need and realize that we keep some veterans on the team in order to be locker room guys. Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, locker room guys. They've been in big moments before. Josie Altidore has 42 goals for the United States national team. Michael Bradley's played in some big international tournaments. And so those guys matter. The team infrastructure matters, but most of all, the foundation matters. So don't rush building the foundation or the house won't stand. The last thing I want to talk about stems back to soccer, but on the other spectrum of the game, and that's the women's game of soccer. The women's beat France 2-1, and they're headed to play England in the semifinal of the Women's World Cup. And though it's cool to see the United States women's team playing for another chance at a World Cup, especially this deep into the World Cup, it's hard for me to be a fan of them. And I was rooting for France in that game because I love France, mainly because of their excitement that they play with the women's team. They play with such passion. And also because I kind of was at the point of Team USA women's team, I'm taking whoever they're playing. And I know that sounds inherently biased against the USA women's team, but hear me out in this. They come off to the casual women's soccer fan as extremely arrogant. Before the World Cup, they said something along the lines of our only competition is France, and that once we beat them, we know we've won the World Cup. And as a fan of all sports, that rubs me the wrong way because it's a slight to your competition. Now, I understand this United States women's team has been dominant in their international play. And you can't take that away from them. I'm not taking that away from them. I'm also saying that sometimes they're playing countries that don't even fund their women's soccer teams. Because, the United States is inherently progressive in giving women these opportunities, and I'm so happy about that. But it also comes off as heavily arrogant against countries that have, worked just to be at that position. That you have to honor the game to a degree and honor the competition to a degree. And saying that you only have one team that's true competition in a tournament is defeating the purpose of sport. Because why do you play the game? Why wasn't that France USA women's game just a final and say, all right, the winner of this one won the World Cup? But it wasn't the final. In fact, they're headed to a semifinal after that. Then they get to play in the final. And I feel that they need to start honoring the game more by saying, yes, we know that we're great, but we can't slight our entire competition as well. Because that will rub a lot of teams the wrong way, as well as a lot of casual fans. I'm all for confidence. In fact, if you knew me, when I play pickup basketball, I'm irrationally confident. And I'll talk mess to anybody who's guarding me, and I believe that the next shot I shoot is always going to go in. But there's confidence, and then you borderline on arrogance, where though your confidence is founded in good reason, you have to honor the game to a degree. And you saying that you only have one team that's true competition in a tournament of a good amount of teams is dangerous, and it's not right. And so that's why I find myself rooting against the Team USA women's team at times. Now, don't get me wrong, Rapinoe's amazing. She had a great free kick goal, and they play hard, and I admire their effort, but off the pitch, I feel that they have to start honoring the game a little bit more and honoring the other teams that they play a little bit more. Because think about how crazy it would sound if we heard France say headed into the next World Cup, the only team we have to worry about is Belgium. What? Every other country that's there, they'd be like, well, what are we playing for at that point? France is the best men's team in the world. And if they said that, it would come off in the media as completely wrong. But yet this one that Team USA said was kind of pushed under the rug. And that's not entirely right. And so that's why I find myself rooting against them. And I hope you guys can see where I'm coming from on that idea. With that being said, that concludes this week's podcast here on theverticaljump.org or wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, like this podcast. And if you found anything I said here entertaining today, share it with your friends. Share it with people that love sports. Share it with people that love basketball, free agency, that love soccer, that just love hearing other people's opinions about stuff. And as always, may the rest of your day be the best of your day. Stay blessed.